Let's go see this beautiful tower, which is only 50 steps across the street from the Newport Tower Museum. And look at this beautiful thing. It's still standing after centuries of years, yet most people just tend to ignore it. A lot of Newporters like to think it better remain a mystery, but for the most part, people come and, like this guy here, they walk their dog and they don't even see the tower. It's something as part of the fabric of the neighborhood. So come on over and let's take a look at it. There's a good doggy. How you doing? All right, how you doing? Good doggies. So who do you think built the tower?
Oh, good question. I'm not from around here. I don't know.
Oh, okay. You had a beautiful dog.
Thanks.
So let's take a look at the tower. You know, one of the main features of the tower that's very unusual is that egg-shaped rock right there. And in the early 1990s, Professor William Penhallow from the University of Rhode Island found several astronomical alignments in the windows of the tower. He says if you come here on December 21st, which is the winter solstice, the sun comes up behind that flagpole over there, and it shines through the south window, which is just around the corner here, and then it makes a small patch of light just to the left of the west window up there. That's the west window. And this patch of light starts just to the left of it, and then as the sun rises, it will move through that west window to a point on the northwest corner of the park, which I'll show you in a second. And then about an hour and a half later, this patch of light works its way down and from that west window, and it illuminates that egg-shaped rock that's in the middle of that arch right there. It's like a spotlight on it. It's like so dramatic that you can see that it was done intentionally. And right behind that rock, egg-shaped rock, is another rock which is shaped like a circle. We call it the sunstone on the exterior. But look, a lot of people suggest, well, that's a keystone, Jim. That's part of the construction. Well, keystones are always in the center of the arch, and you can see that's definitely not in the center of the arch. So someone is trying to tell us something. They embedded a clue that talks about light and talks about time, and they embedded it right into the tower. And these windows have also been specifically placed. There are different heights, there are different sizes, there are different proportions to celebrate these movements of the sun and moon, which I'll explain in a second. Now, if you look at the pillar on the right there, you'll see that it's entirely covered with white plaster. This entire tower was once covered with white plaster inside and out. You didn't see any of these rocks. Now, this plaster is made from crushed seashells in order to get the calcium and limestone, and then it has sand and also gravel in it. And we know they use freshwater sand because if they used saltwater sand, it all would have fallen apart by now. But in the Renaissance, they plastered over the buildings that they made with this type of plaster, and then they painted it in a faux technique called sgraffito, S-G-R-A-F-I-T-T-O. And you can still see examples of this in Prague and the Czech Republic, and also in Italy, all through Germany. And they would do highly decorative things on it, and they would draw lines to make these pillars plastered over look like polished marble, and then they would draw lines to make it look like there were shadows of bricks to make this look like it was all made out of brick. And this technique was known in the Renaissance, used in the Renaissance, and some of those buildings still exist today. So come on around and I'll show you where these alignments are of the astronomy that Professor William Penhallow wrote about in a paper that he wrote in the year 1993. He talked about how he studied this tower, and because of a couple of alignments, he started studying even more and found more alignments. At the time he was writing this, the Danish people came over here and did some mortar testing on the tower, and as part of their project they did a photogrammetric survey, which means they they took pictures of all the different sides of the outside of the tower, and then put them all together in one giant panorama, unwrapping this circular tower to one flat thing. And based on these very accurate measurements, Professor Penhallow was able to determine the heights of the windows and the declination and azimuth that they would see when you're looking through them. So if we stand in this position right here, we can look through the west window, which is right there, and we can see through the tower, and you see a small patch of sky out the south window. It's just a very small window onto the sky. But on the winter solstice, December 21st, the sun comes up above the horizon, and about half an hour after sunrise, boom, it shines right through those two windows from standing right here or anywhere in a line along here. Then that sun, on that day, makes a low arc across the sky, and it goes behind that steeple. It's very low in the sky. In the fall and spring, the sun does not go through those two windows. It's much higher in the sky, and it sets about here. And in the summertime, the sun comes up way at the end of Mill Street over here. It's really high in the sky, and it sets way down over here. So this alignment marks the southernmost arising of the sun every year. We call this the sun alignment. And there's something very special about these two windows, the west window and the south window. They're both tapered. In other words, on the edges of the windows, instead of being flat, they're tapered. They go in like this, and they go in like this on both sides. And they're both tapered so that this alignment, you'll be able to see through all of these windows. Some people suggest that they're tapered so that you could shoot bow and arrows through them. But a gentleman came here the other day from England, and he told me, those aren't bow and arrow windows. And I said, why? Some people suggest they are. He said, I just came back from England and Ireland, and bow and arrow windows are these tall slits that are about this tall and about this wide, and so that they're big enough that you can get the bow to fit all the way through the slit, and you'll be able to reach out and aim where you want, and then once you've fired, you're able to get out of the way so they're not going to shoot you. He said, you would never have a window that wide. You stand in the middle of that, you're dead meat. They can see you. It's like watching a picture of some guy to shoot at. So anyways, these alignments, the splaying of the window, that architectural has to do with this lighting feature as opposed to anything else. So this is what we call the sun alignment. Now come on over, I'll show you what Penhallow calls the moon alignment. Professor Penhallow said that if you come to this park on December 25th, 1996, on that day only, you'll see the full moon come up above the horizon through two of the windows of the park, the west window and the northeast window. And he says the place to stand in order to view this, and he was very specific about it, is right here. There used to be a park bench right here, but if you stand right here and look through the windows, a little bit over to the side here, you can see through the west window and through the northeast window as well. Well, I came here that day, and sure enough, the full moon appeared right through both of these two windows. Now, this is an event that takes place every 18.6 years. It's called lunar minor. It has to do with the northernmost risings of the moon. The following year, the northernmost rising was much higher, and it did not go through the windows. And the next year, it's higher still. And for 9.3 years, the moon's risings are much higher. And then for 9.3 years, it works its way back. And this event will happen again in December of 2015. So it's this window that we're looking through here is the west window. And that one is about 2 feet above the height of the first floor, which is at the height of the arches right there. But the northeast window, that's 6 feet above floor level. It's almost as if they built this tower intentionally for archaeoastronomy. In other words, architecture that incorporates the movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Now come on over and I'll show you one more alignment. We call this the star alignment. Now, I ask all the people that come to visit, can you tell me the name of the North Star? And I get about 50% of the people say, oh, Polaris. And then I ask them, can you tell me how to find the North Star when you're looking up in the sky? And they say, well, look north. I'm like, that's not good enough answer. And I say, but some of them will tell me that, oh, it has to do with the Big Dipper. Well, that's right. If you can identify the Big Dipper, which is one of the easiest to see constellations, and look at the bowl of the Big Dipper, you'll see two stars in the bowl of the Big Dipper that are very bright, Merak and Dubhe. And Dubhe is one of the brightest stars. And this alignment has to do with that alignment with Dubhe. Now I'll show you the alignment, if you stand right about here and look through the west window, you can also see through a small hole in the on the north side of the interior. Now, this two stars, Merak and Dubhe, in the bowl of the Big Dipper, point to the North Star, which is in the tail of the Little Dipper. But the North Star, even though it is north, it's not exactly north, and it's not very bright. That's why it's easier to identify. If you see these two first, and you go 5 lengths of the Dipper, and you'll see the North Star. Well, it's not exactly north. It goes around a dark point in the sky, which is exactly north, but when it's at 12 o'clock above it, or 6 o'clock below that point, then it's exactly due north. Well, here's what Penhallow found. When the Big Dipper comes around, and Dubhe, which is one of the brightest stars, is visible through these two windows, then the North Star, which is just a little off to the northwest, is exactly north. Now, why is that important? Well, for astronomers and navigators, finding exact north is important, because if you're making readings off of other celestial objects in the sky, you want to have a fixed reference point for north. But now, all of a sudden, we've got a building that's aligned with the sun, the moon, and the stars. Someone wanted to connect heaven with earth with a building. Well, now that's not that unusual. This is what church spires do. They have spires that connect the earth with heaven. But this does it in a very unusual way, to have these windows that align with the sun, the moon, and the stars right through it. Someone really knew what they were talking about there with regards to this. So who built the tower, Jim? Well, there's 5 theories about who built the tower. The Vikings in 1150, the Templars in 1398, the Chinese in 1421, the Portuguese in 1501, and the first governor of Rhode Island in 1677. In his will, he says, "I would like to be buried halfway between my stone-built windmill and my mansion." And sure enough, our first governor, if you walk down Pelham Street about a block and a half, you'll see his burying ground. And if you go another block and a half, you'll find the place where his mansion originally was. It was on Thames Street, right near what is now a Penny Arcade. So he's buried halfway between his mansion and his stone-built windmill. But there's reasons to suspect that he was lying by calling it a windmill. Now, our first governor of Rhode Island, you might not know who he is. In fact, I asked hundreds of Rhode Islanders, I said, "Can you tell me the first governor of Rhode Island?" And they don't know. And I tell them, the first governor of Rhode Island was Benedict Arnold. And they go, "Whoa, the traitor? We know all about him. What a scoundrel." I'm like, no, no, no. The traitor was in the Revolutionary War. The first governor of Rhode Island, Benedict Arnold, lived 100 years earlier. Were they related? Yes, they were. In fact, the governor Benedict Arnold was Governor Arnold I. And then his son lived in Jamestown. And then his son lived in Providence. And then his son moved to New London. And then his son, another child, Benedict Arnold IV, and that one was the traitor. So these guys, Benedict Arnold the governor and Benedict Arnold the traitor, lived 100 years apart. They had nothing to do with each other. So, you know, do you want to be blamed for something that your great-great-great-grandchild does 100 years from now? No. But in studying the tower, this Benedict Arnold became a real clue. In other words, Scandinavians think that the Vikings built this. People think the Portuguese built it. People who study the Templars think the Templars built it. The guy who studies the Chinese think the Chinese built it. All these people came to the tower with their own theory. And none of them ever studied the first governor of Rhode Island, who says that he owned the tower and he called it his own windmill. But they all think that he was lying. How do I know? Well, they've all chosen dates that are earlier than Benedict Arnold's time. But none of them ever studied Benedict Arnold. Well, how do I know that? Well, they would have asked themselves 2 simple questions. First off, why is it that of all the people and of all the places here in Rhode Island, the first governor ends up owning this tower? And secondly, why is it in 1663, when King Charles II appointed someone to be the first governor of Rhode Island, why did he appoint this guy Benedict Arnold and not Roger Williams? Roger Williams gets all of the claim to fame here in Rhode Island. Roger Williams founded Rhode Island. Well, that's not true. He came here, and he was certainly a great guy, and he certainly wrote an awful lot in his letters, and contained very inspiring works. But He wasn't alone when he came here, first off. He wasn't a lone man trudging through the wilderness. He had 4 fellows with him. And then in the same month that he moved to Providence and founded it, the Arnold clan came to town. This was William Arnold and his son Benedict Arnold, who was only 19 years old at the time. Now Benedict was able to learn the native Algonquin tongue, as was Williams, and they were the only first 2 people who actually signed the original deed for Providence, Arnold and Williams. But Benedict Arnold later became put his lands in trust with the people from the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and he was no longer a part of Rhode Island, but he became the main trading factor between the Narragansett Indians and the people of Boston. Became fabulously wealthy, and so when it came time to appoint someone to be the first governor of Rhode Island, the king chose this fellow Benedict Arnold. But what I did when studying him was I found that no one has ever done a biography of the first governor of Rhode Island. Why? Because of his name. Up in Providence, you've got Roger Williams University, Roger Williams Hospital, Roger Williams Park. You want to get married in Roger Williams Park? Send your kid $40,000 a year to Roger Williams University? You want to get an operation done in Benedict Arnold Hospital? I don't think so. We're Americans, and we have this thing about the name Benedict Arnold. We see trader right away. Well, that's the first thing that I did. I studied the first governor of Rhode Island, Benedict Arnold, and I found out he knew about these alignments in the tower. He knew all about the tower. He knew who built the tower, and he knew exactly why it was constructed. And it was built by you got to come into the museum to find out.